All right. I think
All
we're
right.
recording now. Yep. Yep. All right. So, I mean, of course, as usual, we can talk about anything and we will talk about as we always do, right? But
Mm-hmm.
Ashley suggested, and I agree, and I'm pretty sure Logan agrees that
Mm-hmm.
talking about why the universe is just right for life sounded like a fun topic. So, and Logan and I have thought about this a lot. And actually, Ashley, I'll send you, I just wrote an essay that has a lot to do with this too. So I'll send you more food for
Okay.
thought. But but actually, I'm just sort of curious, like what does everyone think just as a like what's the puzzle in your mind? And and if you have thoughts about solutions, like what do we think or what's why is it puzzling or is it puzzling or I don't know.
Mhm.
Any thoughts?
I feel like Ashley should start because like we have, I don't know, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
my brain is so immersed in like, what you've been researching for a while, and I want to hear like a fresh, like different.
Well, how about this? How about, I mean, not to, because I don't want to put Ashley on the spot, but I
That's true.
agree
That's
that
true.
it would. So how about like, if you feel able to, Ashley, like, can you say like why? I guess you watched my talk, and
Yeah,
that was
sure.
part of the trigger. But like, what when you emailed and you said, "Oh, can we talk about why the universe is just right for life?" Sort of, what were you thinking, or what were you wanting to, like, is that an okay question?
Yeah, I think what happened in my head when that question kind of came up, it's like it's always something in the back of my head that I always thought about, like questioned, like why are like I think there was like three questions, like why are we here? Um, why did the universe came to be so that we could exist the way we do? And why did everything just work out? Like why do we
Mm.
have our bodies that function the way it does? And why does our heart beat the way it does? Why do we consume water? Why do we eat food? And those are like energy sources, right? But why couldn't it have been like taking, I don't know, this is really random, but just kind of came to my head. Why wasn't it just stuffing a piece of cloud into my mouth and giving me that energy? Like why was it like not all these other random interesting things that I could imagine it being like when I was a kid, like thinking, why wasn't it that I was, why was it that the world came to be such that it made sense to me now and to everyone else, how we kind of live our life and how we kind of follow this routine that just works for every single person. And we all kind of unite in this way, in the sense that we are all fighting to survive in our own ways, but it's all related to some things kind of intertwine and relate for each person, like the way we consume things, the way we live our life, and the way how society has shaped how our brains kind of like decide on things we want and things that we need, we feel like we need. And
Mhm.
then there was also like evolution, how that came to be, how things kind of transform over the different decades and years and that sort of stuff, kind of like why did it just so work out such that it makes sense to me now? But why couldn't it have been any other way? And it probably would have made sense to us anyway, with it being that way.
Right. Oh, that's a really good point. That's a good question. Like,
Hmm.
so, because for example, like we could, in principle, you could imagine that we could be magnetic fields living in plasma waves in the sun or something, right? I
Right,
mean, and then in which case we'd have a different set of concerns about what we would do, right? To get,
right.
that's kind of, yeah.
Like, well, what if it was just that there's no such thing as gravity? But there was like say there is such thing as gravity, but we didn't have to leave at that -9 or 10. Like we
Right.
didn't have to live that style. Like it was
Right.
just more like we were living on a different planet, and that
Mhm.
environment just worked for us.
Mhm.
That sort of stuff kind of runs through my head, but it's like I can't really answer it because what I'm living through now kind of makes sense, but I only can imagine like a life
Right.
where the universe wasn't the way it is now for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Because I feel like there's sort of two, at least two distinct questions. One is, given whatever life is, given that the universe on the whole is sort of such that it allows all the kinds of conditions that can make life, if we take that part as given, like the sort of holistic, in other words, you could imagine a universe that doesn't allow any kind of life at all. Like it's just so, well, like
Yeah.
it's just empty or whatever, right? But then given that it allows any kind of life, then there's the separate question of like why then there's a separate question of how we got into this little niche that we're in and how many different niche is it? I don't know if it's niche or niche. Anyway, I'll say niche. That sounds
Nice
cooler
and
to
yeah.
me. The you know the little niche that we're in, why are we in that one rather than, you know, you can, I mean that's actually would be a really fun writing activity would be to write, okay, like what if we lived on a neutron star where the gravity was
Hmm.
so strong that we were like little
Hmm.
tiny things, or what if we lived in magnetic fields, or what if we lived whatever, you know, try to see how. So that's a really interesting, there's like two questions of is it possible to have life at all? And
Hmm.
then understanding our local little conditions, like you're saying, that and trying to imagine how different could you, like how much would be the same for anything that is what we call life? Would would there be some of the same concerns about getting energy? You know, it's just a question of whether you get
Mhm.
energy from the plasma flares or whether you get energy from eating a sandwich or
Yeah.
photosynthesizing or whatever. Okay, that's really cool. I like that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like, why couldn't
Yeah.
we be more like plants?
Yes.
Or could
Hmm.
we? We are
Mhm.
in a similar way where we consume energy and
Mhm.
that sort of stuff in the sun, but why couldn't it have been that we were just completely living our life like plants, but just moving
Hmm.
versions?
Yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
I
like
just,
now I'm thinking about bugs too. I'm like
yeah.
bugs also. Like what are their perspectives on life and how they
Right.
scavenge, right? Rats
Right.
and all
Right.
these kind of
And
like random things kind of pop in my head, and I'm just like,
yeah, no, that's great. And then microbes, right? I mean, on
yeah,
Hmm.
the little
Hmm.
viruses that are living in my sinuses right now, or whatever. Like
Yeah.
what's their world like, and what's
Hmm.
yeah. And I just started reading a book. It's called, I think it's just called Light Eaters,
okay,
and
Ooh.
it's about plants, but you know, looking at it from that perspective of like, oh, the plants are basically eating light and to
Hmm.
survive in the way that we eat
Hmm.
food. And then it's thinking about all that stuff about like, well, and they can also move, and in what sense might plants be conscious? And you know, what
yeah,
do we mean by consciousness? And can we, yeah. So I think that would be an interesting sort of discussion point is to think about what are the essential features of life and consciousness, and then how varied can we imagine their implementations being, right? Like how how many different ways. What could you change about our experience? Maybe that's a good place to start. What could you change about our experience and still have it be recognizable as an experience?
yeah.
Something like that. I don't know. Now my head is spinning with all kinds of
I
possibilities.
want to know your like both of yours like opinion on the question too, though.
Oh yeah, we will. I mean, it's sort of. Do you want to go? You want to talk a little bit, Logan? Or
Yeah, yeah, no. So, um, like something that Todd and I have been thinking about for a while, and Todd even longer so, probably longer than I've been alive, question mark.
Mhm.
Um, is, this question, right, of like, why does it seem that the universe needs us in a way? Like, why did the universe unfold in such a way that made it necessary to have these like observers or like organisms that experience the universe rather than just exist in it. And um, Todd has said a lot like that um, that consciousness and this ability to experience and observe is a fundamental part of the universe because like one like axiom of the universe is that the universe wants to be described, and in order for there to be a description there needs to be a describer, and so these observers and experiencers are the describers of the universe. So following from that axiom, there are things like, oh, like space and time are separated and distinct because in order for these experiencers to be able to make sense of anything that they experience, it needs to be like um, separated into different compartments so that they can actually like process the things that are happening with that separation of time and space. And so, like having this like fundamental need for the universe to be described, there are these organisms that can process the things that happen in the universe and find their own ways to interpret what is happening.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, it could be like, these interpretations are then communicated through like language or like written word, like humans kind of do, or communicated. Or it's interesting, like, are these descriptions fed into the universe in some kind of like loop? Like, I don't know, just a minute ago when Ashley was talking about it, I was thinking about like how, I don't know, like, what if there was some kind of dimension of information, right? That these like bugs and animals or experiencers are like getting their like paths in life, or like, like photons and like microbes and atoms are like getting their information to go like a certain path, or like a certain, function of like eating, I don't know, something that
Right.
like another animal like gives, or something like that, to create like these ecosystems. Like, what if we are somehow sinking our teeth into this different dimension to get that information, and then maybe like our description of our experiences are then being like fed back into the universe, and like feeding the universe in some way to like energize it or keep it alive or something like
Like
that.
we're robots.
Yeah.
Someone's controlling all of this. It's all a simulation.
Yeah.
Then yeah, and then the universe itself is sort of an organism. Gosh, I have so many thoughts going through my mind now. So many things. Um, so I wonder, so let's see, a couple of things. So one is that just first thing that popped into my mind is you're talking about all the different organisms and their communication. Just something really concrete is that there are a lot of coyotes that live behind in the kind of field behind
Mm.
my house,
Hmm. Hmm.
and and they have, sometimes you just hear a few howls or whatever. But recently, there have been a few nights where I mean, there must be at least 20 of them kind of scattered through
Whoa.
the sort of field
Wow.
back behind there. And they're group, you can tell they're groups because the voices are coming from different directions and sort of and
Mhm.
widely varying tones and screeches and how things that I don't even recognize as like what's making that
Wow.
sound. And so it's so complex that and there's like a call and response kind of thing that goes on. And so, I mean, maybe somebody studied this. I haven't looked into it, but there's a very distinct sensation of this kind of alien, like they're saying something, and
Hmm.
they're having an experience, and my like I can feel, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
a very visceral sense that they are having an experience and they're sharing an experience, and I, of course, project that onto. Oh, they found a rabbit or something, and they're hungry.
Yeah.
And they're gonna, hopefully none of the sounds were the squealing rabbit or something, whatever. But, but, but I don't really know. I mean, they might be negotiating the family hierarchy or something of who's going to be in charge. I've seen too many Disney movies so that I think about the Lion King or something. But. But I mean, the reason I bring all that up is to make it concrete, though, this sort of sense that that's an example that's actually pretty close to our own experience, and yet it's still so alien and so easy for all we know, it's a completely different experience than ours, and yet it's close
Hmm.
enough that we tend to project it into our little categories of
Right.
sort of what's happening. And so I wonder in the universe overall if there's, man, I mean, presumably a photon doesn't really have an experience as we would consider an
Hmm.
experience, but I don't really know what that is. Maybe the whole thing is doing something that I don't know. I'm not sure if that's going to lead anywhere useful, but I just feel like it's
Hmm.
useful to have that awareness in mind that there are these things
Yeah.
all around us that, like Ashley was saying about the plants and they're if we focus our attention on any little pocket of what's happening in the at least in the ecosystem in the living universe, you can get lost in imagining so many different ways of being that must be part of the universe that
Yeah.
are not, actually, it's an extension of what Ashley was saying about, just traveling to a different place, different human place, and you realize how many different experiences there are. So,
Hmm.
um, anyway, so that was one thought.
And wait, I think for like the photon, like what I was meaning when I said like photon was like not necessarily they were having like a more human like experience, but just like, the what is that called? The path of least action,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
right? Like
essentially the geodesic,
the
right?
geodesic, yeah, like how like, does the photon know to go
Yeah.
like in a geodesic pattern, and like where would the photon get that information from to traverse like that specific path? Like, like going more into like, the more like quote unquote like inanimate objects,
Mhm.
like, they like, this can, like how did it know to, well, I mean, we made the can, I guess, but
Well, yeah, but
like,
how do the electrons manage to stay in the structure
yeah.
that they're in, and
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
rules are they following, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
they're feeling the Coulomb force and
Right.
obeying
And like
quantum
the
mechanics.
orbital thing, like how does it know like how much energy it takes for the electron to jump to like another orbital and like
Mhm,
that kind of stuff?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think, I mean, sort of this part's subtle, but I think it's probably really important. I mean, like in my mind, kind of going off of what Logan was saying, the underlying question to all of this, I think ultimately has to do with, I think we need a better understanding of the relationship between observer and observed and
Hmm.
what we mean
Hmm.
by that, right? So like when you think about um well, going to kind of the very foundational level to give my view on kind of how I think about these things, right? So we have this image. So there's a long standing, there's a long history to this sort of question of why is the universe just right for life, in the sense of it's often kind of set up as kind of a fine-tuning kind of problem where we think we imagine, at least I imagine, I guess I can't project on anyone else, but I think that other people sort of think of it this way, at least in Western culture. I imagine that there's kind of a universe, like Logan just did with holding up the can, right? There's an objective universe out there, and I mean, for the sake of giving it a name, let's just call it the physical universe. And and I think of it as being something that has existed for at least 13.8 billion years, and it exists perfectly fine whether or not there's any life in the universe. And it's sort of I imagine it. I mean, I know that it's a model, right? I know that it's a model that we humans have constructed in some sense out of our observations about the world. But when I tell it, I don't really tell it as a model. I tell it as there's this universe out there. It's unfolding according to these rules. And I sort of there's this part that I think is really important, but it's hard to convey. Is I think what we do though is we extract out the fact that there's no way to. So I'm giving a description of the universe that way, but there's no way to do that without somebody somehow. I don't even want to say somebody, without a perspective that gives the description, right? And whatever that perspective is that's giving the description, that's not exactly in my description. When I'm saying, oh, 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was in a hot, dense state, and then it expanded and cooled and
Mhm.
structures formed, and then somewhere along the line, life emerged, right? A- And so it feels weird to say that we're the ones, and so then there's this line that's often thrown around that we're a way for the universe to know itself, right? Or we're the universe observing itself, kind of. But what we're observing is not exactly the universe in its complete sense. What we're observing is our description of the universe. You kind of know it like there can't, I don't think there can actually be just a universe with all these properties that we tell, other than if it that both the description, I guess the way I often say it is that the description and the describer exist together. Like those are complementary things, complementary concepts that you need both. You can't you can't sort of just have a described universe sitting out there with no perspective that kind of represents
Yeah.
you see what I mean? And so then it changes the discussion, I think, because then somehow you have to have within your description of the universe has to be a way to represent whatever this perspective is that's doing the describing. And so then there's like a symbiosis. There's
Yeah.
an interrelationship between the two. And so then it's actually, I think there's kind of a flaw in our thinking when we think, oh yeah, here's this universe just sort of running along doing its thing. And then, oh my gosh, suddenly life popped in to
Hmm.
being. That makes it sound like the universe would be fine without the perspective, but it really isn't. It's sort of built in from the beginning that they have to be entwined. And it's so subtle that I'm not sure quite how to, but I think the answer is somewhere in that set of concepts,
Yeah.
that there's an interaction between when we say we know something, there's an interaction between knower and what is known. And I think quantum mechanics is
Mm.
somewhat starting to recognize that. I think that's why we discovered quantum mechanics, is we're sort of realizing, oh wait, we can't completely take the observer out of it because that's part of the system. And
Hmm.
somehow it's something happens at the interface. Every time we say we know something, like the
Hmm.
shape of a can or whatever, there's something happening at the interface that, not between me, Todd, or you, Logan, and the can, but more between just the very idea of knowing something and what is known. There's kind of a split that has to happen in order,
Mhm.
we almost have to, some part of the universe has to sort of stand outside of another part in order to have an interaction that we say is, oh, now I know this about the universe.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my starting point,
It's
I
like
guess.
movies. Like when you watch a movie, I feel like when you're describing it that way, I'm just thinking like we have our perspective of it and someone generated something, but we're making our own experiences and our own viewpoint on it from
Right,
something on a screen,
right.
right?
Mhm.
And it's so people can be, the people who generate the movies can be really imaginative. And it's like, how does imagine come into play too? It's like
Right,
another question of mine. How does someone
right.
imagine someone fly, a human being flying when we're so used to humans just walking on land? How do you come to imagine that? To me, it's like, okay, yeah, that happens in movies. There's humans who swim in water, mermaids. How do people come up with such imaginative thoughts without having experienced it themselves?
Ooh,
Because
that's
I
good.
imagine all these things, but I feel like I gotta cheat. I cheated my way through it in the sense that I watched movies that helped give me these ideas.
That's what
I
I'm
don't know
thinking
how
too,
someone
yeah.
sits down and says, I'm just gonna draw a human being with a tail and call that a mermaid. Like
Yeah.
how does someone come up with that? That they how do you imagine something like that without having experienced it, without having seen it? Because
Logan's smiling.
I
Yeah.
cheated
Well, I
is how
mean,
I
you could
feel.
almost pin it down as like, how do we create new things, right? How do we
Yeah.
create new ideas, right? How do we make
Mhm.
something that never existed as an idea before? Like you're saying, we sort of cheated because we saw somebody else do it or
Right.
we watched it from a movie, but somewhere somebody, and I think we all do it too. How do we make new social systems? How do we make new scientific theories? How do we make
Right.
new art? How do we make, yeah. Anyway, I think that's a really good point. How do new things come into being?
Right.
From from some books that I've been reading, um, it seems like testimonials from these people who create these things is that it just happens. Like they just kind of like out of nowhere, all of a sudden, this random idea that they like, weren't even thinking about just like pops into their head. It's like, there's and I wrote a paper on like creativity my freshman year at Pacific too. And it's kind of there's just like this unconscious system in the back of your brain that kind of just like takes all of your experiences and just kind of like plays around with all of them and like connecting them
Oh,
together.
wow.
And it's just like this process that you're not like consciously aware of that's happening. And then there's like some kind of like cue in reality that triggers that like unconscious like idea, and then it just kind of like pops into your conscious mind out of nowhere, and you're just like, oh my God, like it just it a lot of people have described it as like, some religious people have described it as like, oh, God just like granted me this idea, or like the universe has just gifted me this idea. Like it seems like it just came from out of nowhere. Like it's just they had, their brain was immersed in concepts that were similar to the idea, and like, maybe they were working on this research paper on dark matter, and then they were, you know playing the violin and were experiencing these like vibration things like on the strings, and then like because their brain was so hyper focused on that, and then their brain was so hyper focused on that, and then they just had empty time, were just like letting their brain just kind of like relax and do its thing and make all of those connections. And then all of a sudden, you know, some like cue happens, or maybe like not even a cue happens, and then this idea pops in their head, and it's just like whoa, like it's just comes out of nowhere. And like another thing I was reading was um there's kind of like math and physics and art and like painting and music and all of those things, like really they're kind of like all the same thing. They're just kind of like this blurry like idea. You can encapsulate this blurriness of a concept with like words, like in English like we do, or you can encapsulate this blurriness with like music notes, like how music does. You can encapsulate this blurriness with mathematics, like how mathematicians do, or you can encapsulate this blurriness in like paintings. And like I
Or
feel
a
like,
computer program or whatever, right?
or computer program. And so I feel like mathematicians could, if they wanted to, like make that blurriness that they're trying to encapsulate in the written language of mathematics, they could just do that, make that blurriness and make it into a painting and communicate math through the painting, or like through a song, or like, through language like we do in like lecture. And so like, all of these disciplines are really just like the same kind of just blurry blob, but the thing that makes these disciplines like distinct, I feel like, are these like different the different ways we communicate that like blurriness.
Mhm.
So like imagination like just plays like off of that like blurriness. Like the imagination like is the blurriness maybe, or like creativity and imagination are creating this like ambiguous blurriness. And I feel like the like ambiguous blurriness thing is then also like the observation, like the description, like the description of the universe is like this blurriness, because there's no way we can like communicate through like all of those mediums. We can't communicate everything that's happening like in that blurriness. And so like I don't know, like that blurriness is I don't know, description. Because I mean, I'm sure. Well, I don't even know. I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure. Like it could be, that animals like, have like that blurriness thing happening too, like with their experience and like other like more like sentient things have that blurriness and I feel like it took a long time for humans to even like recognize like that blurriness, like they just, weren't even aware of it. Um, so
Hmm.
it's like something that is inherent to the experience and something so subtle that things don't even notice it. And it's just like a
Yeah.
natural piece within everything.
I like this image of maybe that's how, like plants are taking the blurriness and crystallizing it in a different way, and the coyotes were
Hmm.
doing that, and wow.
They're communicating it in a
I,
different
I
way.
really, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, 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 that was it. That was the end of my sentence.
We're in that same process right now where we're representing the blurriness, and then every once in a while one of us will say something, and it sort of crystallizes it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Jenna and I were at this store in Portland the other day. It's called Artemisia.
Ooh.
Um, and it's like this really cool, I mean, it has plants and rocks, and I don't know, it's just different. I mean, it just sort of feels like you're going into a magical place, there's just sort of all
Hmm.
these different things, and it just kind of has an ambiance to it. There's a bird that like a living bird that just sort of lives in the store that just sort of goes around and sits on the
That's so cool.
um, anyway, but the thing that struck me when we were there the other day was that they have this shelf that's arranged with all these different, it's basically like a make your own perfume kind of thing. Like it has all these
Whoa.
different scents that you can assemble together in order to make a scent that you want, that is pleasing to you or whatever, right? But so what made me think of it is like Logan, when you were saying about, all the different ways of expressing like mathematics or music or words, or I would say dance or, computer
Hmm.
coding or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
The reason it struck me is because the way they had the instructions organized, they talked about like the bass notes and the middle notes and the higher notes
Whoa.
exactly the same way that, when you think about a musical composition,
Hmm.
you often it's a way of, I guess, crystallizing. I don't know if either of you have even dabbled in like writing music, right? Of just sort of, like but you feel a feeling, and then you try to find the notes that sort of represent that feeling, right?
But,
To express
but
it. And I'm sorry that I'm blanking on his name, but he's a famous conductor that did a TED talk on classical music and the importance of
hmm.
classical music and how it's fading out, and why, he's basically trying to help people appreciate classical music.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he sort of navigates the musical piece in terms of, how like you have whatever key the song is in is sort of like the home. Like that
Hmm.
note is
Hmm.
like the first harmonic, right, is sort of like the home note, and you feel it emotionally. Like if you play that note,
Hmm.
you wander away from it and then you come back to it and you can feel like you're
Yeah.
coming home, right?
Oh.
And that part of he was describing that part of the way that composer, you know, brings the listener along on this journey with them is by, it's sort of, you anchor it in the sort of home note, but then you wander away from it, and then you sort of taunt them with like, we're almost going to get back home, but then no, we're not going
Hmm.
to get home yet. And then that's,
Hmm.
that telling of the story is sort of what makes it feel whatever this vague sense is, and in other words, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what struck me is that I had never thought of doing that with smells. But of course, you can do the same thing with smells, or you can do it with
Whoa.
dance movements, or you can do it with paintings, or with ceramics,
Hmm.
or anything that expresses. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because it struck me in line with what Logan's saying, that it's like if you just I'll just do it with music because that's more familiar to me, but if you if you just look at the notes and you think somebody just wrote down notes, that's not really what composing music is. It's there's this vague, fuzzy feeling, and the notes are like you sort of have that first. You have the vague, fuzzy feeling of what it is that you're trying to create, and then you capture the notes in order to communicate it, like you're saying. And like scientists say similar things about you. You have this insight about, oh,
Mhm.
this is how this all fits together. Actually, that just brought to mind. I remember in grad school having a really hard homework problem one time that we wrestled with for, days. And I was sleeping one night, and I remember waking up feeling like I know how to solve it now. And I didn't, it still took me the whole rest of the day to actually write down the solution and work it out. But there was this moment of insight where I could feel how it all fit together, even though I didn't know the steps yet. But, but I went from thinking, I can't
Oh,
solve this to thinking it's already solved. I just have to write it out. Like, anyway, so I feel like, I'm not sure if I'm saying all that very well, but I feel like it's really important is this distinction between when you create something, it's like we're creating something out of the undescribableness of things, and then we're describing it in order to communicate it. But there's something that happens in that crystallization. And now I'm getting really um, what optimistic or something. And maybe that's how the universe comes into being, right? Is it's sort of it's that same creative process. It's like there's this indescribable existence that then
hmm.
somehow, just like we have an idea and create something new,
Hmm.
whatever the whole of existence is, maybe that's what this all
What?
is, right? Is that there's sort of an
What?
indescribable fuzziness about things, and then somehow as it gives shape to it, that's what we call, the origin of the Big Bang is like the
What?
beginning of this unfolding of the composition. It's something like that. I mean, it's metaphor, but I don't know.
That's so
Food
so
for
like,
thought.
as we have paintings or as we have like dances or we have songs, we have math, we have essays, the way the universe represents its blurriness is just the universe itself.
Right, exactly.
That's so
Exactly. And of course,
cool.
by the universe, that's us. We're
Hmm.
we're parts of that, I think. I don't know. I mean, something
Yeah,
like that.
But what is that in between, that fuzziness that we
Yeah.
can't really describe?
Yes.
Isn't that's really interesting. I never really thought of it that way, but that really makes sense in a way.
That there's
yeah.
something, and I think a key point of this is it's not just a limitation. I mean, I don't know if in your math and computer science stuff, Ashley, if you ever learned much about this, but there are these incompleteness theorems in math, like Gödel's incompleteness theorem and the halting problem
Yeah.
and things like
I
that.
remember like discrete
That-
math, they had a few
yeah,
few that
right?
it's like kind of incomplete, but here's how much we got out of it.
Yeah. And I think all of this is related to those kinds of things where it's not it's not that, oh, we're limited, and if we had a better theory or a better brain or something, then I mean, of course we are limited, but but in this case, it's not about that. It's about the very essence of what it means to give a description of something limits it, right? That I think that's what the essence of those theorems are, is basically if you try to design a language. So I mean, like Gödel's incompleteness theorem is the easiest one to sort of describe. It basically says that if you have a complicated enough mathematical system, like arithmetic, you can encode statements in that system that are true, but are not provable as a sequence of proof steps within that logical system itself. So that's why it's called an incompleteness theorem, is it, it's basically saying that the formal system, the language, is incomplete in the sense that there are aspects of existence that are there but aren't accessible directly through the language, right? And and I think the thing that's important is that at least my intuitive kind of understanding of it is that it's reminding us that there are the act of trying to give a description of something that, just like you sort of feel this probably when you create something, when you try to tell somebody, it doesn't quite sound the same way as it felt to you.
Hmm.
And I think it's something inherent in that process of in order to make it concrete, it limits it in a certain way. And then that's not because you don't have the right description, it's because there's something inherent to what it means to give a description that's, I don't know, it's very sort of Eastern philosophy sort of perspective. It's kind of like the Tao, right? The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, I think is the translation I've heard of that sort of statement, right? But that's just that there's something. So going back to the universe as a whole again, that you can sort of have existence and you can just let it be something fuzzy that you never try to describe, and you could just let it stay there. But if we try to describe it, which of course we sort of have to do, then that's limiting that's limiting it. I don't know. I don't want to say too much.
Mhm.
I figure like I'll say it wrong if I try to say too much more. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Though, like that there are just the act of describing limits what you can say about what you're describing, and it's not because you have a bad description. It's because there's something inherent in the process of what it actually means to describe something that is not all that is. Like,
Yeah.
does that make any sense?
Hmm.
Yeah.
So like would, just as we can't describe like we can't describe that blurriness completely. Um, like if we were to go back to the idea that like the universe is like painting or like mode of
Mhm.
description, like communication or description, or like is like the universe itself, would that mean that the universe, like that description, that mode of description, is that also incomplete?
Yes.
That's
Yes,
cool.
that's what I'm thinking. And there's people thinking just to sort of embed this in all these sort of like Ashley mentioned simulations, right? That's one of the fun things to think
Hmm.
about is whether the universe is a simulation. And I just saw a paper where folks were speculating about kind of along the same lines of I think how I'm thinking about it is that if uh, they were basically arguing that it can't be a simulation because a simulation is an algorithmic, you have to be able to give the precise rules of everything. And if there's more, they're basically doing like an incompleteness theorem for the universe, right? That if there's more to existence than what can be represented algorithmically, then they're arguing that it can't be a simulation in the sense that we would normally mean by a simulation because to simulate something means to give an algorithm, to make a game out of it or to make a program out of it, where that's an algorithmic set of instructions. And if there's more to it than what can be expressed algorithmically, then sort of by definition, you can't simulate it, which I'm not sure my opinion about all that, but it's worth thinking about. And it's also, I think it also gets to the heart of Logan might remember when in quantum mechanics, whatever that was, 2 years ago,
Hmm.
we talked about in some ways the wave function is a more honest way of representing things because it leaves
Hmm.
room for the fact that I almost think of the need for quantum mechanics as a recognition that there's both what has actually happened in the world that we have to keep account of and keep organized, but we also have to have a way of thinking about what's still a possibility and hasn't definitely happened. And so it sort of leaves room for I don't know. I feel like all these things fit together somehow. It leaves room for there to be, um, like back to the incompleteness. To say that we can't describe everything doesn't mean that we can't, in some way, talk about the aspects that we can't describe. We just can't pin them down algorithmically, right?
Right.
Almost like a koan, right? Where you say something in order to point to an idea that you can't say
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Like I feel like all these things are related somehow, that how the
Mhm.
universe comes into being, how
Mhm.
quantum mechanics works, that's a pretty good, morning's work if we could bring under one umbrella like pretty much all everything that we ever think about is sort of in one set of concepts, right? Anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it makes me think like um when if this mode of description for the universe is also incomplete, that means that like we won't be able to receive that communication from the or like observe that phenomenon in the universe because the universe itself is also unable to actually describe it.
Right.
So like it could be like, you know, the dimension thing, like how we physically just can't experience like a new dimension, like maybe like it's like that's the like lack of ability, like the universe can't describe that to us. Like that's just something that it doesn't know how to communicate. But like also it could be, some of these things that we don't currently understand. Like maybe we just won't ever be able to because we won't have like those signals to feed off of because the universe doesn't know how to make those signals to give us.
Right, right. And I mean, and there's sort of I mean, I almost feel like this sort of thing feels appealing because you're right, if you really think about like, I don't know, there's sort of an optimism to it, I think, right? That there's like, mm, there's a kind of an endless creativity that's possible, right? But
Hmm.
not a free for all. It's not like there are very rigid rules about like how things have to fit together, like consistency requirements. But it's almost like, I mean, the dream that led to the dream of mathematics that led to Gödel's incompleteness theorems in like, I think it was around 1930, was people were basically saying that you could lay down these axioms and you could sort of mechanically, algorithmically find all the things that were true and prove them, and find all the things that were not true and prove that they were not true. And in some sense, then you're done, right? You've said everything there is to be said. But in a way, I've never quite thought about it in these terms before. But in a way, it's like there's always room, if we think about the universe as being that way, there's always room for creativity because there's always you can never just prove all the things. There's never going to be like a theory of everything in the algorithmic sense where you can just say these are all the things that are true and this is exactly what's going to happen with everything. There's this sort of subtle, and back to Ashley's original nice framing of all of this. There's this almost infinite variety, maybe infinite variety of ways that one could experience being alive in the universe, and yet there's something shared by it all about what it means to be alive in the universe, even though there are all these different, I don't know, is that, yeah, something like that, right? That there's kind of, it's just the right balance of enough consistency. If the universe were just completely random and chaotic and we couldn't predict anything, then we wouldn't be able to do anything. We couldn't have this conversation. We couldn't, I mean,
Hmm.
nothing, just there wouldn't be beings because everything would just fall apart all the time. But on
Hmm.
the other hand, if it's completely rigid, then that's no fun because then we can't create new things and we can't discover and we can't, then it's just mechanical. And so it feels like it's sort of just in that sweet spot as it would sort of need to be for us to for what feels meaningful from my point of view about, if I was gonna build a meaningful universe from scratch, not knowing what I was doing, I feel like this is exactly the kind of tension I would have to play with, right? Is I would need there to be enough predictability for things to, you can't make a painting if you don't have sort of, or actually music again is probably better. You
Mhm.
have to have rules of music to constrain how you're going to do it, but you have to have enough openness in it to always be able to create new interesting pieces out of it.
Mhm.
And you need that tension and that balance. So it sort of feels like the structure of the universe just fits that kind of. Although maybe I'm just saying that because I emerged from this universe, so of course I say that. And if it had been
Mhm.
different, I would have liked it different, like you said, Ashley. But anyway.
I feel like the commonality as I'm sitting here and just thinking about what we're all saying is consumption. Like we
Mhm.
consume and then we let out. So like, for example, you're saying things, I'm consuming it. Both of you are giving me ideas and
Uh-huh.
describing something, describing our
Yeah.
question, trying to answer the question. Then I'm consuming it, and then I think through it, and I'm about to spit something out from it. And I
Yes.
feel like that's our whole life. The commonality I see is consumption, whether it be food, whether it be thoughts, even the ocean, right? There's all these animals in the ocean, and they're all consuming,
Yeah.
whether it be food or just the flow of water through their skins.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
kind of that consumption creates experiences, and maybe that in between is a matter of all that consumption. That the in between, as in like that gray fuzziness,
Yeah.
might just be our way of taking in, consuming what we're experiencing, and something happens at the back of our head, like Logan was describing, this fuzzy thing, and that happens, that we're like processing all this, and then something comes out of it. Maybe it's our way of answering a certain question, or something creative comes out of it. But I feel like it's all tied back to potentially consumption. We have to
Mhm.
consume to be able to produce something
Mhm.
out of
Something.
it.
Yeah, that's good.
And maybe that is, I don't, I can't describe the fuzziness because I also am just thinking, trying to describe what it is in my head and what's happening in my head when we're talking about this. But it's like all I can think about is how much I'm consuming right now, and how much that's helping me think through trying to answer this question. And
Mhm.
this happens all throughout life, right? With everything I've experienced, at least, like I've consumed something, I've thought about it, I'm being taught something, or I'm consuming
Right. You
whatever
read
it
a
is that I'm
textbook or
consuming.
whatever, and these
Right.
ideas flow through you, right?
And then I make my own due process of it. I don't just take your word for it, but I think it through myself. And that's how I register things. And that's how I can produce things myself. If it were just that I was consuming and not thinking through it, I don't think that would have done anything. But the fact that something's happening in my head to think through something is causing me to be more creative in that sense, and more, and have the ability to produce something,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
interesting. Like the food we eat, I mean, TMI, but we're producing something too, because something's happening in our
Mhm.
body, in our
Right.
digestive tract system, and then we're producing something. So
Right.
it doesn't seem like there's only that humans only have the ability to consume, and that's it. It seems like there's a consumption property and then a production, kind of this
Uh-huh.
cycle that's
Uh-huh.
needed. And it's needed in almost everything. Like
Yeah.
when I see it, like even plastic,
I was gonna say, I
even
think
like
little
just
too.
everything that we use, that we do. I can't
Yeah.
think of a thing that I've consumed, that we've consumed and haven't had produced something out of it, whether it be producing more, right, more pollution to the world, or more benefit to the world and the people we help. But there is something that we're producing. It can be good or bad. It's
Yeah. 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 Well,
interesting.
and even, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that was it.
Uh, well, and I love that as sort of a general theme too, right? I mean, because you can, well, I mean, like as you were talking, I have this as I was consuming what you were saying, right, and processing it in my own way. Of course, we're bringing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide, and but um, but also the Earth as a whole, right? I mean, we're consuming visible light, sunlight,
Right.
and the Earth is actually re-radiating. infrared, right? I mean, so
Oh,
there's a bringing in and a letting out in that
Yeah.
sense. And even like really fundamental, physics is all about um, boiling things down, distilling things down into their kind of most general principles in a way, right? And I think the second law of thermodynamics is almost you could translate it into your terms of what you just said about consuming and letting something out is that you can get, if you think about those diagrams of a heat engine, right?
Hmm.
You have energy, you have high quality kind of energy, like, low entropy energy that comes in, like sunlight or hot temperature in a engine or something. It does something, it runs a device, runs your car or whatever, and then it spits out, at the radiator, it spits out lower quality energy at a lower temperature or whatever. But that schematic of that process that we do in thermodynamics is like a very general thing. You could think of it like you're saying, I think, as, you know,
Yeah.
the, the chemicals compounds that we consume and eject versus yeah, and how we do that with I. Anyway, I just really like that. That's a good way to think. That's a
yeah,
good way to
because
unify lots of things.
I mean, it is kind of like a conservation of energy and conservation of matter kind of thing
Mhm,
too, right?
mhm, mhm,
But like the ideas, like I mean, our brains are like electrical, I guess, and like, have energy. So like, maybe this consumption of ideas, the processing of ideas, and the production of ideas is also a form of like conservation of energy or
Hmm.
something like that. Because like when you think about also like there's, like fields, like for like electromagnetic fields, like if you, put energy into an electromagnetic field, it starts oscillating and then like produces like photons or like light waves. And then like, gravity too, like, you know, things like with gravity, like, radiate away like gravitational waves and like send like produce like gravitational waves from like the consumption of energy.
mhm.
And so it's like, all these things. And I think the only thing like that I like, like black holes, like
They
black
radiate
holes
Hawking,
can, right?
Hawking
They
radiation, though.
Hawking radiation. So it's just like, yeah, maybe like ideas also have like this conservation of energy,
Uh-huh.
like vibe and application to
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There's like something that flows through, and like you said, there's both a conservation law, it seems like, of matter and energy, and there's a sort of a transformation law, right?
Hmm.
There's something that's
Hmm.
conserved, but it doesn't stay the same,
Right.
right? Which is sort of like in thermodynamics. I might be overstating this analogy, but it's still useful, I think.
Hmm.
That like in thermodynamics, we have more laws, but there's two core ones, right? That
Hmm.
for this, that there's the basically conservation of energy is the first law, and the second law basically is a transformation law. It says that entropy
Hmm.
increases, right? Which is says that yes, energy is conserved, but it doesn't stay quite the same. And that has to do with information fundamentally,
Hmm.
probably, right?
Hmm.
Is like,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is again related to what you're saying that like
Ideas.
we take in we take in a certain kind of knowledge and then it affects us and we transform it and then you know just like you said, just like we're doing here, right? One of us says something and
Hmm.
that becomes input for the others of us, and then the others say something that becomes input for the one who said the first thing, and then there's just this
Hmm.
cycling through of stuff where there's a sort of a conservation of something that's flowing through us, but we're also transforming it every time it flows. It doesn't
Yeah.
stay the same.
It seems like a
Conservation of
necessity
information.
too.
Yeah.
Is that Logan?
Hmm. Oh, I was just gonna say like it's just like a conservation of information.
Right.
Hmm. It seems like a necessity too, in a sense that we need to consume in order to live.
Mhm.
like plants, for example, I was just thinking of plants that there are some plants that die dramatically, and then you
Mhm.
pour water, and there's the sun, and then it livens up, it perks back up so amazingly, and it's like just water and sun is that all you need? And I feel like that happens a lot throughout life too. We need to consume in order to be able to live it, to be okay, to it's really interesting. It's like, okay, so now I'm asking myself, like, why does it have to be that we had to consume, right? What made it so that we needed to consume, and then some kind of machine work that happens, and then we produce something.
Mhm.
Like we're functioning like machines in that matter, but it's
Mhm.
but I wonder why we needed, why the universe, that's like the question, right? Why did the universe came to be so that we could exist the way we are? And why did it require that we needed to consume? Like, why do
Yeah,
we need to consume in order to produce value or something that might be deemed devalue to the universe?
right. Like, why can't we just be us in a static state? Why isn't that
Right.
possible? Why does there have to be something flowing through us,
Would
kind of?
we explode? Is that
Yeah,
because, like, right? If imagine
that's a
if
great
we
question.
ate all the
Yeah.
food and it never got released somewhere, we would
Mhm.
pro I don't know, maybe in a
Yeah,
different universe, in a different world where it was possible, it would be okay. But
yeah,
right, like why did the universe came to be such that it just makes sense to me that you need to consume something and you need to produce. But why couldn't it have been the other way where it neglected those
yeah.
two properties to begin with?
That's good. What if there was a universe where stillness was, like our universe seems to be characterized by flow.
Mm-hmm.
What if there was a universe where that was characterized by just complete stillness, where
Yeah.
things could just be static and yet be fine?
Right.
Yeah.
And how far can that stillness go, right? Like, would it
Right.
mean that everything in that universe pauses and we are all just experience like seeing things, but technically seeing is still doesn't feel like stillness because I think of my eyes moving. I'm just thinking of like
Right.
is there a world where we can imagine where everything is still? Would that mean that there is nothing then?
Right.
Because nothing exists almost, it seems like that would become nothing. Or is it like I'm just thinking of a globe like Earth, right, in that still world, and it just doesn't rotate, and there's no green, no blue, like there's no land and there's no water. It's just pure emptiness, but somehow you can still experience things by just being still. And maybe you could even experience more from that because everything is so quiet, like everything has to be still. Sound, the things I see has to be almost like nothing. Kind of goes back to like, what is nothingness? Is that possible?
Right. It's back to our original conversation about is nothing
Yeah.
also everything. Well, and it's making me think about, right, what time is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the motion is basically what we characterize by time. I mean, I could soon if I try to think about what it would mean to have a state of existence without motion, my thoughts go to could I have a state of existence that doesn't use the concept of time?
Right.
Right? I mean, like not and because it's tricky because as you said, the way we have evolved in the world we're in, we don't know even how to think about. At least I don't know how to think about it without that. But I don't mean a frozen moment of time. I mean not having time.
Right.
Because I think those are different, right? I mean, if we
Yeah.
just freeze in one moment of time, that's different than saying time isn't even a parameter anymore. Because I think that's what we would need to do what
Hmm.
you're saying is to somehow still have an existence and experience that just in some way transcends the idea of time. That we don't separate things out into moving from here to here. That it's just I don't have language to talk about it because I think of it.
Right.
I say it's just one moment of time, but that's not what I mean. I mean no time.
No time. And it's very difficult to think that way because yeah, I was thinking momentarily frozen time, right? But you can't really do that because that kind of suggests that after it's frozen, there's some I think of it like linearly, like there's something that progresses after in time, right? It's
Right.
frozen for one moment, but it has to be that we strip away time completely. And it's so hard to grapple on that because it's
Right.
like we're so used to time passing. It's
Right.
easy to say, oh,
Right.
time is a concept, it's just
Right.
time. It's not it's easier said than done, I think is one of those things with time. It's like you want to be able to imagine that time is not linear, right? Like I've always, as a kid, I've always wanted that to be like something I could answer. Like time didn't have to be linear. It was always a cool topic, but it's so hard to truly imagine that because I keep circling back and it goes back to time being linear in a sense that it progresses forward.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, as soon as, like you said about our nothing and everything conversation a couple years ago, that as soon as I try, like if I try really hard to think, what if I, like let's just say, after we're done with this conversation is going to be the end of existence, right? Because this is the high, it's sort of the universe decided this is the best that we can possibly come up with in this universe. So why try to do anything else after this conversation, right? So existence is going to cease after this. But if soon as I try to do that, what I end up imagining, like if I try to imagine nothing,
Hmm.
I immediately I start thinking of moments with nothing in them. But
Right.
moments with nothing in them isn't
Existence.
nothing
It's
anymore, right?
something.
It's something because I've still got time. So if I'm really gonna have existence ends, it doesn't mean a time when, 'cause now I just think of emptiness with a bunch of moments in time that are empty, but that's not it
Right.
because that's still time. So how do I can't I can't think of
That's
It's
so
funny
but it's
too,
worth
because
thinking
like
about.
this universe where everything is still and like we don't have time, like that means also then like we wouldn't have like energy because
Mhm.
like energy like causes things
Linked to
to
time.
move. So like if there were energy, like it would cause this one thing to move, which would cause this other thing to move, which would just have a lot of motion, so nothing would be still.
Mhm.
But like also, like if you don't have like energy and you don't have like time, like if you were to try to like I mean the way that we're built also, I think Todd was touching on this as well. Like we are built for our eyes to receive photons, but like photons wouldn't be able to move, so we wouldn't be able to have like light. So we wouldn't like the way that we're built, we wouldn't be able to like experience any form of like sensory things because sound waves wouldn't work, light wouldn't work, like our neuropath, like the electrical signals that we get from really like any sort of sensory experience like won't work because that requires time, that requires motion, that requires energy, like all of those things.
Right. Now I'm back to wanting to imagine being a photon
Hmm.
because in the speed of light reference frame, right, everything happens, all events that line up with the reference frame of the photon in relativity, they would be at the same, the time interval between those events is zero between events that for other observers have some non-zero. So I wonder if there's some way to get at what it would mean to be timeless by thinking about the transformations in relativity. I'm not sure that you can, but it just is an interesting clue. Hmm. Yeah, can you have experience without time? I think that's one way to phrase the question.
Is there like an organism built so that they don't need the passage of time to be able to experience?
But somehow, I mean, even the word experience implies, I think it's I think it is biased by our our experience, right?
Hmm.
Because I couldn't have if I don't have okay, here's maybe one way to look at it. It like I like to talk about space and time as a filing system for thoughts or ideas or whatever, right? It's sort of a way to, you know, John Wheeler kind of famously, I don't know what the exact reference is, but this is credited to him of saying space is what keeps everything from happening. Time is what keeps everything from happening at once, and space is what keeps everything from happening to me. It's sort of like fundamentally that's the purpose for those coordinates. So, is there a way to think about experience where there's no filing system where didn't we try to do this with one of your talks, Logan, where we tried to put all the slides on the same slide
Yeah, we had
and
an
sort of
idea to
like
do.
so I mean but I mean I think this is maybe a useful line of thought is to sort of approach what it would mean to not have time. It would be like somehow you'd have no way to distinguish, everything would have to be holistic. You'd have no way to distinguish, like imagine your life without time. Like all the things that have happened in your life so far would have to be in some sense stacked on top of each other because there wouldn't be a way to separate them. You'd have to sort of experience them all at once. Or maybe not. Maybe there's something other than time that could do that distinguishing, but maybe it's useful to think of that's the role that time seems to play, is that it separates them out so you can kind of give attention to them one at a time, right? And if
But even if it happens all at once, honestly, I would feel like I would explode. But even if it happened all at once, I still have to register each moment of my life, each experience that I'm
yeah,
about to experience,
I know you're right.
Mhm.
all as they go through. And as that goes, I feel like time kind of goes too.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right.
Unless there's a way to just be right. How come it
Mhm.
wasn't that when I was birthed, this all didn't just come out of like this was all what was in my head and this is all I had to live by, right? Like like you said, all your experience happens all at once. I think that would have been the moment where everything just happened up in here and everything already was registered in my brain. And when I came out to live my life, that it would have had been that I've had all those experiences already. Like my thoughts are already there.
Mhm.
Everything was there. I've probably lived 100 years and it's
Mhm.
just I don't know. It's so interesting to think that way. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm
You
just
are.
trying
You,
to
I
think
mean,
of
you're
a
making sense in
time.
you're making sense at the level that I can't articulate. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
I
like
actually can't figure out
like
how to make it possible without time passing, having experienced all my life, stacked up all in one. And the only way I can think of that is it was already there to begin with. But even with that, it's like, how did it get there? Why wasn't it that the universe did it that way, right? Did it require that time pass and that I experienced some parts of life for me to then experience more of it, right?
right. I
As
think
time goes, that's really what it is, though. It's you experience
yeah.
more, and people say, when I was in college or when I was young, I used to think this, and now I think this because I've learned my lesson, or because I've learned that there's this part to it. It's like as time goes, you would think people become more wiser in the way they think, right? But if is it possible to, have that all come into you all at once? And would I have been wise then? Like would I have been more experienced in life then and had more
Yeah.
and what would that life look like? Would that mean that what's coming after that, having experienced what I have experienced already, like say I live up to 89, my entire 89 years is all in my head already. What more is there? Like now I'm zero, I'm age zero. Now what more can I do from
Right.
0 to 89? Or do I just
Right.
keep replaying those memories?
Right. Why do I need those extra years if I'm yeah. I mean, I think this I know it's even though I don't understand it either. I feel like this is a useful line of thought, though, because it's getting at some of the things that are about what makes these concepts like time
Right.
and experience. what's essential to them, right? So, I mean, one of the things, well, two things that are popping into my mind. One is this book, Einstein's Dreams, that Logan is reading, which I recommend, because it sort of explores different ways of thinking about time as if they were dreams about how time could be.
Okay.
Um, but the other is that I think it might be useful to think in terms of, I almost have this image of our lives and the unpacking of our lives, like you just said, Ashley, in terms of, the time from 0 to 89 and how we
Hmm.
learn and how it unfolds. If you think of two perspectives on it, like if there's a holistic perspective where you could imagine sort of at the end of your life, sort of seeing your life whole. That's the kind of holistic, almost, but not quite timeless perspective. But then if you want to zoom in and see what that wholeness really is, then you need time in order to unpack it almost, right? That there's sort of a
Right.
there's a another book that I really like by someone whose last name is Bortoft, and it's it's called The Wholeness of Nature, and it's kind of a way of looking at science from the perspective of Goethe, the poet and playwright,
Hmm.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, I think. But there's a phrase that he says in there that always sticks with me, and it's he makes a distinction between the parts of a system and the system as a whole, and these complementary sort of perspectives. And the line that always sticks in my mind is the the parts are the place of the whole where it bodies forth into presence. And there's this sort of idea that without the holistic kind of sense, it's hard to make everything feel meaningful. But without the zoomed in parts point of view, nothing happens. And you can't, anyway, so I know it's still sort of like a koan where we're kind of grappling at something that I can't put into words, but maybe you can sort of feel what I'm
Yeah.
feeling, where there's some
Yeah,
there's something about that, where there's this complement between the observer and the observed, the parts and the whole. All these things are sort of swirling together to make like whatever it is that makes things be.
I think like one thing that I think of um to be able to imagine the possibility of the existence of no time and even the existence of the no space, like the existence of no space and no time is just kind of like how like in cartoons when like cartoons like get into fights, there's just kind of like this ball of
Yeah.
like fuzziness that happens. And this is the same way that I think of like superposition too, and like quantum mechanics, um, of just like two, like a yes and no all in one. Like it's just kind of like everything, all the events are all just happening in this blob, and all the events are related to each other and can affect each other. Like the past can affect the future, and the present can affect the past, and the present can also affect the future. They're all just kind of like connecting with each other, but like also there's the absence of space, so everything is just like all together in this one little like amorphous blob kind of thing. And so like all possibility is happening all at once in this blob of things.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Which also reminds me of that blurry blob thing in the in our heads.
Yes, yes. So the
And
summary of our conversation is that existence is about crystallizing a blurry blob into
Yeah.
mhm,
into
mhm.
concrete things that we can
And
say.
unfortunately, I think I do have to go.
Oh, that's okay.
Um,
I heard there's this
but
time
wow.
thing that
Yeah,
we're
there's
beholden
this
to.
thing called
Yeah,
time.
that we haven't escaped yet.
Hmm.
All
Hmm.
right. Well, thanks again for pivoting to sorry that we couldn't meet in person. That would have been
Oh
fun.
no, this was
But this obviously
phenomenal.
we do well on Zoom, so so
Yeah.
this works too.
hmm hmm
So
hmm And
yeah,
it's
thank
recorded.
and it is recorded this way. So I will send you the recording so we can ponder this some more. We can make it timeless that way.
Yeah, true.
Right. Well,
All right.
happy, happy New Year, and we will get
Yeah.
in touch soon about when we can talk more.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that.
Right.
Take care,
Take care,
everyone.
both of you. Yeah. Talk
Yeah.
to you later.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.